Among many time-honored traditions of the United States, few are as dark, disturbing, or as damaging as the legacy of Hollywood's child stars. While we often envision these young celebrities leading glamorous lives akin to our own deepest dreams, many endure fates far more harrowing than most adults can imagine. Since the earliest days of cinema, countless child actors have fallen prey to substance abuse, exploitation, and theft, often suffering at the hands of their own parents, predatory adults, and dangerous stalkers. Today we're going to dive into the stories of these child stars and examine the tragic legacy that Hollywood, and by extension the world, has allowed to persist. Perhaps unsurprisingly, child performers existed long before the rise of Hollywood. In the latter half of the 19th century, the American entertainment scene experienced a boom, with thousands of new theaters opening across the country. Almost immediately, prolific acting families, such as the one that produced the infamous John Wilkes Booth, began to emerge, bringing child actors into the spotlight. In fact, there were reportedly more child entertainers during this era than at any other time in history. Unlike their future counterparts, who were often cast in cute or comedic roles, many 19th century child actors took on serious parts, frequently performing Shakespeare for American audiences. As the nation's entertainment landscape shifted toward film, the roles of child actors evolved as well. One of the most notable figures of the silent film era was Jackie Coogan. Born in 1914 in Los Angeles to vaudeville performers, Coogan was introduced to the stage at a very young age, frequently appearing alongside his parents. In 1921, his life took a dramatic turn when he was discovered by Charlie Chaplin. Chaplin cast him in The Kid, a role that thrust the young actor into national fame. Over the following decade, Coogan became cinema's first true child star, featuring in a succession of successful films and reportedly earning nearly $2 million, a sum that would be equivalent to around $37 million today. However, when he turned 21, Coogan discovered that his mother and stepfather had spent most of his fortune on themselves. Although he eventually won a lawsuit against them in 1938, only approximately $250,000 remained, from which he received nearly half. While the outcome wasn't exactly a victory for Jackie Coogan, his case led to lasting change. In 1939, California enacted what became known as the Coogan Law, designed to protect child actors from financial exploitation. Under this law, a portion of a child performer's earnings must be set aside in a trust referred to as a Coogan account, which is managed by a trustee. Once the minor turns 18, they gain access to the funds. However, the law only requires that a minimum of 15% of their earnings be placed into the account, leaving the remaining 85% largely unprotected unless additional safeguards are voluntarily implemented. Unfortunately, in the years that followed, many child performers continued to suffer financial abuse along with a host of other dangers. Although the 1930s were a challenging period for much of the world due to the Great Depression, it was also a time of remarkable advancement and rapid growth for cinema. Silent films gave way to talkies, transforming the film industry and solidifying Hollywood's status as a global powerhouse. The era's biggest child star, arguably the most successful of all time, was Shirley Temple. Temple began her acting career in 1932 at the age of 3 and spent the decade captivating American audiences with films such as Curly Top, Heidi, and The Little Princess. By 1950, at just 22 years old, she had retired from Hollywood with more than 40 film credits, leaving behind a legacy unscathed by the demands of the film industry. After a successful film career, Temple transitioned into public service, where she continued to make history. She became the first woman to serve as a U.S. ambassador to Ghana, the first female U.S. chief of protocol, and later the first woman-appointed ambassador to then Czechoslovakia. In addition to her diplomatic service, she held positions on the boards of several major companies, including Disney. Shirley Temple remains a rare example of a child star who not only survived, but thrived, both during and after her time in the spotlight, a level of experience and success few others have achieved. Judy Garland, born Frances Gunn in 1922 in Minnesota, grew up, much like many child actors of her era, under the strict guidance of vaudeville performers. Although she was raised in the Midwest, her parents were deeply committed to show business, having her perform on stage with them as early as 2.5 years old. Yet behind the scenes, the Gunn family was riddled with personal turmoil. It was widely believed that her father had affairs with young men, a scandal that ultimately forced the family to relocate to California in 1926. Once in California, it didn't take long for young Frances to enter the film industry, with her mother, Ethel Gunn, often cited as one of Hollywood's original stage mums. By the age of 10, Ethel had placed her daughter on a strict diet paired with a harsh regimen of pills, amphetamines in the morning to keep her energized and sleeping pills at night to ensure rest. In effect, she turned her own daughter into an addict before even reaching adolescence. Then at just 13 years old, she was signed by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM, Hollywood's most powerful film studio at the time. During the Great Depression, when many families across the country struggled with hunger, Judy Garland was also starved despite earning $100 a week. In addition to strict food restrictions, she endured a grueling work schedule that began with 3 hours of early morning schooling, followed by singing rehearsals and full days on set. Often juggling multiple film roles simultaneously, Garland would work late into the night, sometimes finishing just in time to return to school the following morning. Despite this punishing routine and an increasing dependence on pills, she managed to maintain a thriving film career throughout her teenage years. Her breakout moments came in 1939 when at just 16 she was cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. However, the studio had originally wanted Shirley Temple for the role and allegedly pressured Garland to appear younger and smaller. To achieve this, she was put on an even more extreme regimen, a strict diet of chicken soup and black coffee, combined with her regular amphetamines and diet pills, and shockingly, up to 80 cigarettes a day, a method then considered effective for weight loss. Beyond the obvious health risks associated with her extreme diet and drug regimen, and those 80 cigarettes a day, Garland was frequently subjected to harassment and exploitation. On the set of The Wizard of Oz, her third husband later claimed that she was sexually harassed by several actors portraying munchkins. Moreover, strangers often approached the underage star in public with sexual propositions, and Louis B. Mayer, then head of MGM, allegedly groped her without consequence. Then at just 19 years old, Garland became pregnant. In what must have been one of the most traumatic moments of her life, she was reportedly forced by her parents to have an abortion out of fear it would damage her carefully cultivated public image. In the years that followed, her dependency on drugs deepened and her physical and mental health continued to deteriorate. Garland ultimately died at the age of 46 from a barbiturate overdose. By the time of her death, she had reportedly suffered from kidney issues, hepatitis, nervous breakdowns, ongoing struggles with her weight, and injuries from repeated falls. Her tragic end stood in stark contrast to the bright image she had been forced to maintain in the public eye. This was a story all too familiar, even during Hollywood's so-called golden age. Bobby Driscoll, born in 1937, was yet another child star caught under the industry's unforgiving spotlight. At just 5 years old, he was discovered through a chance connection. His barber's son, a talent agent, introduced Bobby to the business over dinner. By 1943, he had landed his first film role, a modest part in Lost Angel, a performance that quickly captured Disney's attention and propelled him towards stardom. At 9, Driscoll took the lead in the now controversial Song of the South, and he soon went on to win an Oscar at just 12 years old. A few years later, he famously lent his voice to the animated character Peter Pan in Disney's classic film. In 1953, Howard Hughes purchased RKO, which began distributing the studio's films and effectively gave him control over Disney. Unfortunately for Bobby Driscoll and other child stars, Hughes harbored a notorious disdain for young actors who he found phony and irritating. As a result, Disney dropped Driscoll, the decision that reportedly haunted him for the rest of his life. Despite his efforts to move on by attending university and starting a family, Driscoll's life eventually took a tragic turn. After dropping out of both Stanford and UCLA, he and his partner, Marilyn Jean Rush, endured a toxic relationship clouded by multiple marriages and divorces. During this tumultuous period, Driscoll succumbed to heroin addiction, which led to a stint in rehab. Ultimately, his struggles caught up with him, and he died at the age of 31. Despite early warnings from stories like Garland's and Driscoll's, very little was done to address the plight of child stars in the years that followed. The tragic legacy of troubled child actors continued through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Actors such as Dana Plato from the Brady Bunch and David Cassidy from the Partridge Family, who once embodied the ideals of the wholesome all-American family, later struggled with substance abuse and various personal issues. Similarly, Gary Coleman, a young star in the late 1970s who captured the hearts of American audiences, faced his own battles in later life. In 1978, at the age of 10, Coleman was cast in the hit show Different Strokes, a groundbreaking and at times controversial series. The show focused on a wealthy white widower who adopts 2 young black boys. Despite the controversy, it became a massive success and propelled Coleman to stardom, in part thanks to his iconic catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" Behind the scenes, however, the young actor faced significant health challenges throughout his life. At the age of 2, he was diagnosed with a congenital kidney disease and required constant medical attention. Although the treatment did save his life, it stunted his growth, leaving him small and childlike well into adulthood. For 25 years, he essentially lived without functioning kidneys and depended on dialysis to survive. Despite reportedly earning around $100,000 per episode, Coleman's happiness on different strokes dwindled as the series progressed. By the 8th season, he was experiencing bouts of vomiting between scenes and struggling with severe depression. When the show was cancelled in 1986, he vowed never to act again. In addition to his health challenges, Coleman later discovered that his parents had stolen over $1.3 million from his personal accounts, only to lose it all through poor investments, a misfortune that led to a lawsuit. Despite these setbacks, Coleman attempted a comeback in the 2000s, both professionally and personally. He returned to acting and eventually got married. However, his marriage was soon marred by reports of verbal and physical altercations, further complicating an already troubled life. After undergoing heart surgery in 2009, Coleman began experiencing seizures and frequent hospitalizations. His health continued to deteriorate until, in 2010, he tragically fell down the stairs of his home, an incident that ultimately led to his death. Unfortunately, many child stars of the 80s suffered horrific fate, like Coleman, and in some cases even worse. Judith Barcy was another child who began her acting career very early at the age of 3. Through voice acting roles in animated films such as The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven, she became a household name by the age of 10, a milestone she would tragically not reach. Her father, a reported violent alcoholic, frequently abused both Judith and her mother. While Barcy was in the Bahamas filming Jaws the Revenge, her father allegedly held a knife to her throat, threatening to kill her if she refused to return. Although the LA County Department of Children's Services had investigated reports concerning their home, the lack of physical marks meant little could be proven. Despite clear warning signs, no one intervened. On July 27, 1988, Barcy's father shot both his daughter and wife in their home and set the building on fire with them inside before retreating to the garage, where he shot himself as well. This exceptionally troubling case highlights a myriad of other issues, and Barcy was far from the only child actress who met a tragic end during that decade. A year later, Rebecca Schaefer, a teenage model and TV actress, was tragically murdered outside a Los Angeles home. A stalker who had obtained her address through a detective agency that, in turn, accessed public records from the Department of Motor Vehicles was responsible for the crime. While her death was a devastating tragedy, it sparked significant legislative change, including laws against stalking and restrictions on the public availability of DMV records. Despite these efforts, stalking continued to be a serious issue for many celebrities in the years that followed. Meanwhile, while some teen celebrities in the 1980s made headlines for their horrific fates, others attracted attention with their reckless and excessive lifestyles. During this period, one group of teen actors, dubbed the Brat Pack by the paparazzi, a label the group largely despised, became impossible to ignore. Much of their prominence sprang from filmmaker John Hughes, who cast these teen heartthrobs in iconic films such as Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, and The Breakfast Club. Soon, names like Molly Ringwald, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, and others became household fixtures, with their posters adorning the walls of nearly every American teenager's bedroom. However, the Brat Pack's fame extended far beyond their roles in these beloved films. They also gained notoriety for their wild partying, struggles with addiction, and turbulent personal lives. Anthony Michael Hall, known for his roles in 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club, became a member of the Brat Pack and at just 17 made history as the youngest cast member of Saturday Night Live, a record that he still holds to this day. Despite his youth, Hall later admitted that he was a heavy drinker at the time. Fortunately, by 1990, while still in his early 20s, he got sober and continued to build a successful career. In contrast, Rob Lowe faced more severe addiction issues, battling both alcohol and drugs. He later recounted a trip to Australia in 1990, during which his substance abuse left him unable to remember a single moment. His struggles were similar to those experienced by fellow Brat Pack members such as Andrew McCarthy and Charlie Sheen. Meanwhile, Robert Downey Jr. confronted his own battles with addiction and even spent time in prison from 1996 to 2001 on drug charges before he ultimately turned his life around. Molly Ringwald, on the other hand, experienced multiple instances of sexual assault during her time as a child actress. When she was 13, Ringwald reported that a 50-year-old crew member on set got too close to her, pressing himself against her inappropriately. A year later, at age 14, she endured a film director forcibly sticking his tongue in her mouth. Unfortunately, she was not the only child star in Hollywood to suffer sexual assault during that era. Both Corey Haim and Corey Feldman went through similar ordeals while serving as teen icons in the 1980s. Despite the widespread neglect, abuse, and other troubling behavior occurring in the industry during the 80s, much of the press chose to focus on the bad boy image associated with many of these young stars. Instead of recognizing children crying out for help, the public was presented with a facade of cool kids they wished that they could be. No story illustrated this odd, backwards mentality quite like that of Drew Barrymore. From a young age, Drew Barrymore was thrust into the spotlight, beginning with her first advertisement at just 11 months old. She made her film debut at the age of 5 in Altered States in 1980, but it was her role as the lead in E.T. the Extraterrestrial 2 years later that propelled her to a level of stardom few child actors have ever experienced. Then, in 1982 at the age of 7, Barrymore made history by becoming the youngest ever host of Saturday Night Live, a record she still holds. However, as is often the case with the young stars, life behind the scenes was far from perfect. Her father was a violent alcoholic who regularly abused her mother until the divorce when Barrymore was 9. After the separation, her mother began taking her to nightclubs where Barrymore was allowed to drink, a fact that amused her mother and friends alike. By the age of 12, she was using marijuana and cocaine, which led to her first stint in rehab before she even reached her teens. The following year, she was emancipated from her parents, determined to forge her own path. While this decision likely played a role in her later success, considering that Barrymore has enjoyed a very successful career and is thriving today, she would continue to struggle with addiction throughout her life. As the world transitions into the 1990s and many former child stars began facing personal struggles, one might have expected Hollywood to move away from relying on young actors, or at the very least, to establish stricter boundaries around their use. Instead, the years leading up to the new millennium witnessed a surge in the popularity of young performers, marking an era bursting with child stars and even teen heartthrobs in America. While the music industry capitalized on their appeal to create successful boy bands, a significant issue on its own, the film industry continued to harness their charm as a means to attract global audiences. Among early 90s child stars, few reached the heights or endured as many rumors as Macaulay Culkin. One of 7 children, which includes future Oscar winner Kieran Culkin, Macaulay and his siblings were all pushed into the film industry by their father, Kit, a former aspiring actor whose own career never soared like that of his children. Macaulay began his film career at the age of 6 in Rocket, Gibraltar, but his roles in Uncle Buck and Home Alone propelled him to international stardom. At age 15, he found himself entangled in his parents' bitter custody battle, during which it was discovered that he was worth approximately $50 million, a figure of which he had been completely unaware of because Kit had kept the details of his earnings hidden from the family. Despite persistent rumors, Macaulay Culkin did not emancipate himself from his parents at the time. Instead, he took legal action to remove their names from his trust fund, thereby protecting his finances. Later, he helped his mother fund her prolonged legal battle against Kit, as she had spent most of her resources simply keeping a roof over their children's heads. In the years that followed, more rumors swirled about Culkin, including widespread tabloid and online claims that he suffered from a severe heroin addiction in the early 2010s. Although he has acknowledged past recreational drug use, this never appeared to be as serious an issue for him as it was for many other child stars. Today, Culkin is regarded as a well-adjusted actor, partner, and father. Unfortunately, not all young actors from that era would be so lucky. Edward Furlong first rose to fame as John Connor in Terminator 2: Judgment Day in 1991 at just 13 years old. Although his performance in the film was commendable, it marked only his debut in acting. Following James Cameron's masterpiece, the world recognized his potential, and he later gained further acclaim for his roles in films like American History X. As his career progressed, troubling rumors began to surface. In 1992, at the age of 15, Furlong reportedly entered into a relationship with his on-set tutor, a 29-year-old woman named Jacqueline DeMack. Furlong's family quickly intervened. His uncle even attempted to file statutory rape charges against DeMack. However, nothing materialized from these efforts, and the controversial relationship continued until the two ultimately broke up in 1999. After their split, DeMack, whose actions, by all indications, should have raised red flags, sued the young actor, accusing him of frequent assault. Meanwhile, Furlong himself struggled with substance abuse, falling into addictions to alcohol, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. He first sought rehabilitation in 2000, but his recovery efforts were short-lived. In the ensuing years, Furlong's life took a darker turn. His addictions led to severe health issues, including the loss of most of his teeth, and he encountered multiple legal troubles, including charges related to domestic battery. Recently, however, he's made progress. By re-entering the public eye, repairing his dental issues, and speaking candidly about his past, Furlong appears to be on a path to recovery, even if it took nearly 3 difficult decades to get there. Of all the hard-partying child stars of the era, few reached the same levels of fame or infamy as Lindsay Lohan. Like Drew Barrymore before her, Lohan entered the industry at an early age, signing with a modeling agency at just 3 and appearing in television commercials. Her big break came at 12 with The Parent Trap, a beloved film that showcased her impressive range and set the stage for her rise. From there, she shot to superstardom with the early 2000s hits Freaky Friday and Mean Girls, quickly earning a reputation as Hollywood's reigning party girl. By the late 2000s, it was nearly impossible to walk through an American supermarket without encountering Lohan's face splashed across tabloid covers, each speculating about her latest night out. Like many before her, she struggled with addiction, cycling through rehab stays and gradually losing the professional respect she once commanded due to her erratic behavior on and off set. Thankfully, in recent years, Lohan has made a significant turnaround. Now sober, she has started a family and returned to the screen through a series of projects with Netflix. While stars like Lohan, Furlong, and others have emerged from the chaos in recent years, much of their hardship can ultimately be traced back to decisions they made after achieving fame, a fact many have acknowledged in hindsight. However, for one young actor, at the turn of the millennium, the challenges he faced were rooted in circumstances far beyond his control. When Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace was released in 1999, expectations soared to astronomical heights. The fan base, known for its passion and occasional volatility, was ready to scrutinize every frame. Although today's generation embraces the prequels, many viewers at the time were openly disappointed. Unfortunately, much of that frustration was directed at the film's young star, Jake Lloyd, who portrayed a 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker. The backlash was swift and brutal. Magazines, online forums, and nearly every media outlet imaginable were flooded with criticism. Even at school, Jake, only 10 years old when the movie came out, was relentlessly bullied by classmates, leaving him with no safe space to retreat to. Despite trying to continue his budding acting career, the constant harassment ultimately proved too much. By 2001, he'd stepped away from Hollywood entirely. In the years that followed, troubling signs began to surface. Reports indicate that Lloyd experienced increasing confusion and difficulty distinguishing reality. Although he had graduated from high school in 2007 and attempted to attend college shortly afterward, his condition continued to worsen. He began hearing voices and was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. In 2015, he led police on a high-speed chase across multiple South Carolina counties, a series of events that landed him in jail for nearly a year. Since then, Lloyd has struggled with ongoing mental health issues, moving in and out of treatment programs with the support of his mother. While many factors can contribute to schizophrenia, it's difficult to ignore the lasting psychological damage that often results from being relentlessly targeted and vilified during such formative years. For Jake Lloyd, fame did more than deprive him of a normal childhood. It may have fundamentally altered the course of his life. As we've seen in cases like Gary Coleman's, these brutal life stories extend far beyond Hollywood and into the realm of television. No period has been more detrimental to the young TV stars than the late 1990s through the early 2010s. While some child actors of the era, such as the Olsen twins, emerged from fame relatively unscathed and went on to launch successful business ventures, many others who appeared on television during that time were not so fortunate. Demi Lovato, arguably one of the most recognizable figures for anyone under 30, began her acting career at a young age on Barney and Friends, appearing as one of the children who performed alongside the Purple Dinosaur. She then catapulted into fame as a Disney Channel star, shining in roles on Camp Rock and Sonny with a Chance before launching a successful music career. However, during this period, Lovato started facing serious mental health challenges and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Alongside these issues, she struggled with heavy drug use, primarily cocaine. Her addiction became so severe that she admitted later that she couldn't board a plane without smuggling cocaine by some creative method each time. By 2010, at just 18 years old, Lovato checked into rehab. Although she managed to achieve sobriety in 2012, she later relapsed and suffered a near-fatal overdose in 2018 from heroin laced with fentanyl. Since then, Lovato has reportedly stayed clean and now speaks openly about her ongoing battles with addiction and mental health. However, perhaps the most ill-fated Disney TV star was Orlando Brown. He began his acting career with a breakout role in 1995's Major Pain, which caught Disney's attention and led to a series of roles with the entertainment giant. Shortly afterward, he voiced characters in animated shows such as The Proud Family and Fillmore, before landing his most well-known role as Eddie on That's So Raven at age 15, a part he played until the show ended in 2006. Although his career started promisingly, Brown's life quickly took a darker turn, and he developed a reputation as a troubled child star. Between 2007 and 2018, he had run-ins with the law, including arrests for DUI, drug possession, domestic violence, robbery, and more. In recent years, he's also become known for making bizarre and often disturbing public statements, some so extreme they could even give Kanye West pause, including claims about former co-star Raven-Symoné. While he has attempted a comeback, his erratic behavior and ongoing personal struggles have made the road forward extremely challenging. Although Disney is often criticized for its handling of child stars, this issue was not unique to one company. Nickelodeon, another major player in children's television, also faced its share of troubling stories, one of the most notable being Amanda Bynes. By age 7, Bynes had already begun performing stand-up comedy and secured an agent, quickly catching the attention of Nickelodeon executives. In 1996, the 10-year-old was cast in All That, a sketch comedy show similar to Saturday Night Live, but for kids. In 1999, her popularity had skyrocketed, prompting the network to give her her own spin-off show, The Amanda Show, which ran for 3 seasons. She later transitioned to film and became a Hollywood star throughout the 2000s. However, in the 2010s, following the release of Easy-A, Bynes abruptly announced her retirement from acting. While many were initially puzzled by this decision, especially since she had been one of the few child stars who maintained a healthy, successful career, it soon became clear that things were not as they appeared. In her late teens, Bynes began using drugs, including ecstasy, MDMA, and Adderall. By the time she retired from acting, she had already become dependent on substances and was struggling with mental health issues. Her troubles quickly escalated as she faced a series of legal issues, including accusations of multiple hit-and-runs and a DUI charge in 2012. Then in 2013, events took an even darker turn when Bynes set fire to a neighbor's driveway, leading to a reckless endangerment charge and a 5150 psychiatric hold. Following these incidents, her mother wisely placed her under a conservatorship, assuming full legal responsibility for her. Although the conservatorship ended in 2022 and reports suggest she's doing much better now, many still express concerns about her appearance and behavior. However, she was far from the only Nickelodeon star of the era to face significant struggles. In 2024, the documentary Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV was released, casting an uncomfortable light on the hostile, inappropriate, and often disturbing environment many cast and crew members endured on Nickelodeon sets. One of the most troubling segments of the documentary was episode 3, which focused on the experiences of child star Drake Bell. As Bynes' co-star on both All That and The Amanda Show, Bell appeared to be another promising actor and a safe bet for executives. In 2004, they gave him his own show, Drake and Josh. However, even before the show premiered, Bell was already grappling with offset issues far darker than anything his comedic co-stars could have imagined. When he was around 15, a dialogue coach on set began developing a close relationship with the teenage boy. Although Bell's father immediately sensed that something was wrong and tried to create distance, he was ultimately overruled, and the young actor was even allowed to spend frequent nights at the coach's house. During this time, Bell was sexually assaulted by the coach in various ways, confirming his father's suspicions. Initially silent, Bell eventually disclosed that his abuser had frequently been calling his phone, a development that raised suspicion among those around him. After coming forward with the truth, Bell, still a teenager, was forced to sit in a courtroom and listen as numerous famous actors, directors, and other industry notables defended the man who had harmed him. Despite admitting his crimes, the abuser was sentenced to only 16 months, of which he did not serve a full year, and after his time in prison he was allowed to work on projects involving other children. Meanwhile, Bell, who later faced his own scandal involving a minor, continued his acting and music careers, which, surprisingly, have flourished in Mexico. Sadly, these examples only scratch the surface of the many cases involving troubled child stars and their lasting impact on the entertainment industry. In general, children who choose or are forced into the world of entertainment receive little protection. Although federal labor laws in the United States address child labor, many of these laws do not specifically apply to the film industry, leaving regulation in this area largely to individual states. States such as California and New York, both major players in the entertainment sector, have established laws governing child performers' working hours, meals, parental guidance, and other protections. Yet there remain 17 states in the United States that do not regulate child entertainers at all. Even though some laws protect children on set, very few address incidents like Bells, where the assault occurred off-set. Moreover, protections against controlling parents, exploitative managers, or other predatory adults who may operate behind the scenes are extremely limited. While the Coogan law has been updated over the years, it still mandates that only around 15% of a child's earnings be set aside, leaving significant room for exploitation. While it's tempting to attribute many of these situations to fame gone wrong, poor parenting, or a host of other factors, one recurring issue unites them all. Decades ago, many nations began to understand the harmful effects of thrusting children into the workforce while their brains are still developing. Imagine, for a moment, being a child who is not only helping out in your parents' shop, but also working a full 40-hour week, attending at least 10 hours of schooling, and then fulfilling additional obligations such as practices, photo shoots, or other commitments. Even adults find it challenging to manage such a hectic schedule, let alone children whose focus should be on their mental and emotional growth. Furthermore, many of these children face intense public scrutiny, pressure from adults, and influences that would be troubling even for grown-ups. It is easy to see how overwhelming this must be, especially for those who are still children. Unless substantial changes are made in the film industry, or at least in the legislation that governs it, children will continue to be vulnerable to harm, exploitation, or worse, all in pursuit of a few $1 million and some merchandising potential. Thank you for watching.